Welcome to the Brief Pod. I'm here with Katie Berigtold, Health and Wellness Educator. Hi, Katie.
Hi.
I'm so excited to have you on here today to talk about you. And what I love is that we met through a mutual, should I say, I guess, friend, um, Ashley. Um, so tell us a bit about you.
Yes. Yeah. Well, first of all, thank you. I'm so happy to be here. And yes, I love how we met. It was super serendipitous and beautiful. And I love that we've become friends. So thank you so much for having me on. Yeah, a little bit about me. As you mentioned, I'm a health and wellness educator. I have my master's degree in holistic nutrition that I received up in Portland, Oregon. And really, I got that master's about 5 years ago, but I've been pretty passionate about health and wellness for a long time. I would say since my late teens. And a lot of that was just because I was having health problems as early as my late teens. Like I just knew that something wasn't right with my body, from experiencing hormonal imbalances to digestion issues to acne to fatigue, like all these things that were really impacting my quality of life. And I knew that there was more available to me and that there were solutions to those problems. So became really passionate around that time, and that carried through, to my mid 20s when I got my master's in holistic nutrition. And now I'm just really passionate about sharing all kinds of information on wellness and nutrition in any settings that I can. That's included teaching some college courses, which has been an amazing experience. And then I like to do community workshops and even podcast interviews and things like we're doing today.
Oh, I love that. And I didn't even know that you also do college, I want to say workshops, but that's not what I mean. College classes.
Yeah. Yeah. I actually no longer do. I just stopped. But for 5 years, I taught like an introductory nutrition course, which was really amazing, and then a sports nutrition course. So it was really fun to take all my knowledge and be able to apply it in a setting like that. It was definitely a challenge and it taught me a lot. So it was great.
I love that. So what are you geared toward now?
Yeah. So, I mean, I love educating women in general and really on nutrition, but also I'd say my biggest passion at this point in my life is teaching women stress management, which I do take the approach of as including lifestyle changes as well as nutrition, because both play a role and we can talk about that. But a lot of that came from, again, my own health struggles. So when I was in grad school in Portland, it's kind of ironic, right? Because I was passionate about health. I go up to Oregon to get this degree and I'm learning all these amazing things about how to be healthy. And my health at that time was the worst it's ever been. So I was chronically stressed in a lot of ways. I basically tried to fix everything with just my diet, which makes sense. That's what I was learning. And, that's what I was in at the time. But I realized that while nutrition is a huge piece of the puzzle, it isn't the only piece. And it really hit me hard. I basically was in a situation for a couple years where I was going to grad school and getting my master's. I was doing CrossFit 6 days a week, which for your listeners who don't know, it's a very intensive exercise program. So 6 days a week is a lot to be exercising in that way. I wasn't sleeping because I was up studying, writing papers, etc. And I was drinking way too much coffee to get myself through the day, which all those things I just mentioned are big contributors to overall stress in the body. So the result for me was that I was completely burnt out, tired almost all the time, had no energy, unfortunately, to really connect with my classmates or enjoy Portland, where I was living. I was in this great new city and wanting to explore, and I just didn't have the energy. My skin was suffering, my hair was suffering, my hormones were completely out of whack. I had trouble sleeping and insomnia, like everything was just completely off. And it wasn't until I learned, a year or two later about how stress can come in a lot of different ways and how impactful stress can be on your body, that I realized I really had to make a change and that nutrition alone wasn't going to be enough. So.
Wow. That is interesting because my college days sound like that, where I was
So
like,
many do.
I was not sleeping. I was drinking coffee then too, except I stopped doing that due to stomach issues. But it's just interesting hearing that. So now I feel like there's some answers for my past when I was so
Yes.
like intense.
Yes. Yeah. And it's funny that you bring that up. And that's something that I really like to talk about, because I think a lot of women have been in that position, whether it be like when they were in school, like you were saying, or even with like balancing a career and being a mom. Like, how often does that probably equate to like less sleep than you need, too much coffee, like running, going constantly? So I just want to make the point that while our society kind of normalizes those things, like it's normal to not get enough sleep and it's normal to need all this coffee, like it might be common, but common doesn't mean that it's normal. It's not okay, and it's impacting your body. And definitely if you're feeling like you're a little off balance there, there's a lot you can do for your health and well-being.
And what are some of the things that you would suggest that they could do?
Yeah, so I think probably it would be best if I started with just a little rundown of like the stress response for you guys, if that's okay. So
Yeah.
anytime your body's under stress, and we can list sources of stress in a minute here, your body's into what's called fight or flight. And I think most people have heard that term at one point or another. And fight or flight was really beneficial for our ancestors because, you know, if you're all of a sudden walking along and there's a tiger that you need to outrun, that response is necessary to help you survive. It's literally a survival response. So all sorts of things happen when you go into fight or flight. Your heart rate increases, your vision sharpens, blood is diverted towards your limbs in case you do need to run or fight. So really your body's preparing itself for an emergency situation. And if you really were walking along and saw a tiger, that would be helpful. You would want your body to react that way because it's what you need to survive and figure out what to do in that situation. However, most people I know aren't encountering scary, dangerous tigers every day when they're walking down the street and aren't experiencing general threats at that level, right? Most of us think of things like bills and finances, fights with our spouse, too much on our to-do list, things like that when we think of stress. And those things, while stressful at times, yes, are not life-threatening, but unfortunately your body goes into emergency mode when you're stressed, whether it's truly life-threatening or not. Your body doesn't know the difference. So when we're chronically stressed, we're in this emergency state all the time, and that can start to have some really detrimental health effects. And I like to list some of those too for people so they know. So chronic fatigue, if you're always tired, stress can be a big part of that. You know, as a woman, if your cycles are off, if you're not getting your period or it's irregular, that can be in part due to stress on the body. If you are moody and irritable all the time, a lot of that can be stress. So there's so many things, digestion, even if you have really poor digestion and you sort of feel like you're always getting indigestion and gas and bloating, like a lot of that can be stress too. So there's so many things that we don't think of as being linked to stress, but really it can underlie so many health issues that I think it's really important to talk about.
Yes. I appreciate you sharing these because it literally sounds like the list.
Right? I
Yeah.
know. That was me in grad school. I actually found a photo a while ago that I'm going to post in the future on my Instagram, but it's terrible. I mean, it's a picture someone took of me during a CrossFit competition, and I'm running, but my belly is so distended that I look like I'm 8 months pregnant, and I'm not. It was just because I was so stressed that my body was bloated and I couldn't digest my food properly. So it's crazy what stress can do to your body. And on the flip side, I think it's really empowering when you learn that that could be a big contributor to your symptoms, because there's definitely a lot you can do to manage it as well.
Yeah. Yeah, I appreciate you sharing some of those examples because I'm sure that a lot of the women that are on and listening are going to be like, oh my goodness, that's me. Um, so
Yes.
I think I will ask for them, what are some things they can do to relieve
Yeah.
the stress?
Yeah. So I think it's really helpful to start by like what causes stress in the body, right? Because again, I think we all think of stress as being psychological. So, you know, related to things that we're stressed about, whether it be work, family, or something else. that can certainly be stressful. And we can talk about that a bit more. But in addition to that, there are so many other things that cause your body to go into that stress response and put stress on your body. So one example is inflammation. So a lot of people are eating inflammatory foods in our culture. Things like sugar, processed foods, poor quality fats, all of those create a certain level of inflammation in your body. And that inflammation causes stress. So that's something you probably wouldn't normally think about when you think of stress, right? But think about, if you're already psychologically stressed and then you have a really poor diet on top of it, you're just adding fuel to the fire and putting a lot of additional stress on your body. Another source, and this was a big one for me, going back to my story, is high intensity exercise. So I think programs like CrossFit are great. I still currently do CrossFit a couple of days a week, but I was doing it 6 days a week. The workouts were really tough. They were the kind of workouts that leave you just wanting to lay on the ground for 10 minutes afterwards to try to recover and figure out what just happened to you. And it's not that that's necessarily always bad, but if you already have a lot of stress happening in your life through some of these other ways I'm going to mention, and then you add that on top of it and you're not recovering properly with good nutrition and with quality sleep, it can add a ton of stress. And that was a big cause for me, was just too much difficult exercise. So we can talk about solutions for that, but let me go through the others first.
Oh,
so
yeah.
We talked about exercise, diet, psychological stress. So there's also some that are kind of crazy that no one would ever think about, like dehydration. So if you experience even a 1% decrease in your total body water, your body's going to be under some stress. Dehydration is really stressful on your body. So drinking plenty of water is actually important for helping manage stress. And then additionally, blood sugar is another one I like to talk about. So kind of going back to how, a lot of diets are not the best. What can happen is that when your blood sugar dips, if you're eating sugary foods, they're going to cause your blood sugar to spike really fast and then dip really fast. And when you hit that dip, your body is basically registering that you don't have any energy. You don't have any energy for your cells. That's what low blood sugar is. And so your body goes into an emergency response. So cortisol, which is one of your stress hormones that's engaged during the fight or flight response, actually comes in to get your liver to release sugar into your bloodstream. So what can happen is if you are dealing with low blood sugar all the time because of your diet, you can have this constant flood of cortisol, which again is part of the stress response and essentially leaves your body in a state of chronic stress. So those are just a few. Another one I like to throw out is caffeine. So caffeine works by increasing your adrenaline and your cortisol, which are your stress hormones. It makes your blood pump faster. It makes you more alert, which can feel really good in the moment. And again, it's not to say that coffee, kind of like the exercise, is necessarily problematic, but it is problematic if you're already getting stress from a lot of other sources and then you throw the coffee on top of it. It can just be too much for your body. So if you know that you're stressed, I would just be really mindful of your caffeine consumption. And it's really hard because oftentimes people who have been chronically stressed are also very tired. So it can be a difficult transition to getting off coffee. But in my experience, when you cut down, you eventually actually have way more energy than you had prior, if that's encouraging for anyone. And then the last one I always like to mention is sleep. So if you're not getting enough sleep or quality sleep, right, meaning you're not sleeping soundly, going into deep sleep, you're waking up during the night, like all that is not good quality sleep. So if you're not getting enough, or if you're not getting good quality sleep, that's also going to increase your stress hormones and increase stress on your body.
I think I have to reevaluate my life.
I know, it's a lot to think about. It's a lot to take in. And I mean, the thing is, if you know, like if this is resonating with you and you're like, okay, this is me, this applies to me, it doesn't have to be a complete overhaul overnight, right? Like maybe you are someone who drinks a ton of coffee. So you're like, okay, my first step is going to be to cut down to a cup a day of coffee and to try to get more sleep at night. And then once that's kind of under control, you can add in some of the other layers. But yeah, again, I mean, I think it's really common to operate this way in our society, but just because it's common doesn't mean it's healthy or normal. So it's good to take a look at and good to see where you need to break some of those patterns.
Yeah, absolutely. because society right now, I feel like we're trying to shift it, but it's like coffee is your best friend. That's what you need to drink. Luckily, I do not drink that, but I still have a lot of the other things that you said.
Yeah.
But the hustle and bustle where you need to work, 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 do not stop. And that's actually right now something I'm trying to change in my own life, is to calm down my mind and think, just because I'm not working every second doesn't mean I'm not like making an impact or and then sleep. Yeah. I slack on the sleep too.
Yeah. Yeah. So see, you were able to self-identify a few areas for improvement there. And quite frankly, like even doing this and being in this line of work, I still usually have a few I could be working on too. So the goal is never to be 100% perfect. It's just to move the needle from where you are in a better direction.
Yeah, absolutely. So with stress management, what's like the routine that you kind of have for yourself?
Yeah, that's a great question. And this will be nice because I can kind of go into solutions as I talk through this in general. So, first of all, I think as far as psychological stress goes, I don't want to minimize that because some people I know feel completely out of control with the stressful thoughts they're having. I am not a doctor. I always like to make that clear. So, I think that if you are to a point where you feel like your stress is completely unmanageable, it makes sense to talk to a therapist or another qualified provider who can help you through some of that more psychological based stress. But for me personally, and in working with women, some things I find helpful for dealing with that type of stress is mindfulness. So either establishing a meditation practice, and I know a lot of people have some resistance to meditation, but it can be as simple as 5 minutes a day to start. And really what meditation does for me is anchor me back into the present moment. And if you're anchored into the present, it's hard to be stressed because you're not thinking about the past or the future. So just learning to be present through meditation, I think, is really valuable. Also using the breath. So anytime your exhales are longer than your inhales, you are engaging your parasympathetic response, which is the opposite of fight or flight. Your parasympathetic is actually your rest and digest response. So just doing some breathing exercises can be a really quick way to calm your body. So one of my favorites is just to breathe in for a count of 4 and then breathe out to a count of 7. So again, just longer exhales than inhales, and that will bring your body into that parasympathetic mode pretty quickly. So that's a good technique too, because it's so easy to do anywhere. So if you have something even that you're nervous about or stressed about, like some event, speaking, test, whatever, it's really nice to incorporate some of that breathing before those types of things. So those are both kind of at the core of what I like to do for myself. And then additionally, I mentioned all the things that I went through when I was in grad school. I kind of just had to reevaluate my routine. So for me, I've cut down tremendously on coffee. I typically only have coffee a couple times a week now, if that. It's kind of like a special weekend thing for me versus an everyday thing. I had to reevaluate my exercise. So this one is huge, especially if you're a woman who's stressed and you have severe hormonal imbalances. I would really look at your exercise. Because more intense exercise is not always better. And I think we kind of equate those really hard workouts with like, oh, I'm going to get in such great shape and I'm going to lose weight. When actually stress can cause you to hold on to weight and or gain weight. So if you're doing the wrong types of exercise for your body, it can work against you and it can actually inhibit your body composition goals of losing weight or whatever they may be. So if you're stressed, you definitely should exercise because exercise has been shown to be beneficial for stress, but it's the type of exercise that's key. So, maybe instead of doing CrossFit 6 days a week, like I was, you go for some walks to start. Or you do some gentle intervals where you're walking for 2 minutes and then running at a nice light pace for a minute. So it's not that you can't exercise, you just want to evaluate what's going to work for your body, depending on where you're at. And a really good indicator is, do you feel exhausted after your workout or do you feel energized? Because often we'll feel energized right after, but if it's a workout that was too intense, you'll feel really tired in the hours that follow. So you really want to look at what's energizing for your body, and that probably means that you're on the right track. So I had to switch up my exercise routine. So it basically turned into less CrossFit and more yoga and walking for a given time. And that worked quite well for me. And I actually saw more weight loss with that than I had when I was in CrossFit, which was mind blowing to me. And then let's see, I did caffeine, the workout changes. Another one for me was sleep and getting that under control. I had the worst insomnia during my time in grad school, just couldn't fall asleep at night for the life of me, felt so wired at night. So I really had to do some work with that too. And there's some basic sleep hygiene tips that I think are good for everyone to know. So first, this is a really tough one, but if you can eliminate screens for an hour before bed, it helps so much, which I know a lot of people, we're on our phones, we're on our laptops working, but the type of light that comes through from your screen can actually inhibit your melatonin production, which is your sleep hormone. So a lot of people notice a big change just with getting off their screens a little bit earlier in the evening. To be honest, the best recommendation is 2 hours, but I think that's really hard for a lot of people. So I like to go with 1 hour. So 1 hour before bed, no TV, computer, phone, and then do something relaxing if you can, like read an actual book instead of like a book on your Kindle or on your phone. Do some of those breathing exercises if that feels good. Like whatever feels good for you and helps you unwind that isn't so stimulating is really good and a good place to start. And then there's also some basic things like you always want to make sure you're sleeping in a room that's cool enough. Ideal sleeping temperature is about 68 degrees or less. If you're hot, you might end up waking up during the night or have a hard time getting to sleep. And then making sure your room is as dark as possible. So if you have really big windows where light's still coming through at night, that can actually impact your melatonin as well. So it could even be looking at getting blackout shades to really darken your room, or just doing your best to eliminate light sources in your house to make your room as dark as possible when you go to bed. So yeah, those are the changes I made, which was a lot. But I kind of had issues in every area, right? So I had to look at everything and sort of overhaul myself over time. But those strategies I used are really good general strategies that anyone could start applying to work through their stress.
Yeah, thank you for sharing those.
Yeah.
And it's super funny that you said all this because I literally just bought the darkening shades today.
Oh, yay. That's amazing. Yeah, that's great timing.
Yeah, so it's so funny. But I have to practice absolutely with the screen time because, as you know, I'm just like, no, I'm just going to be on my phone until bedtime. But it's true, like you feel energized still instead of, wanting to sleep. And in my case, it affects my partner too, because if I'm awake, then he's awake. It's not very healthy for either parties. But I appreciate you sharing that because I definitely personally am going to apply a lot of these things that you're sharing as well.
That's great. Yeah. Oh, no, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No. You go.
Oh, I was just going to say, yeah, I mean, I think it's really challenging, especially like those of us who are kind of on the more entrepreneur path in life to like really put our things away early and stop working at a certain point. But it's so important because the thing is, if you're getting quality rest and you're really taking that time to nurture your body, you're actually going to end up with more energy and be more productive. So it's so tempting to work late into the night. But when you take that time to really recharge, I feel like personally, I end up getting twice as much done the next day versus days when I'm exhausted. So just keep the big picture in mind and know that sleep in the long run is actually going to help you get to those goals faster.
Yes, thank you for sharing that. So with stress management, do you have a program for this right now?
Yeah, so it's in development actually. So there is a program coming that should be open in September is my hope. But in the meantime, I do offer one-on-one coaching and I do offer group classes. So that's where I'm at with offerings in the meantime.
Oh, I love that. And where can they find you to, if they're interested in getting that?
Yeah, so probably the best place to contact me and check me out is on Instagram, and that's just going to be my name. So Katie Berigtold is my name, and that's my name on Instagram.
Perfect. And I'll be sure to link that as well. Are there, I forgot to ask regarding food wise, like, are there some foods that you recommend that are energy based that are good for you for
Yeah,
stress?
no, I'm so glad you asked that. And it's funny because I skipped that when I was talking, but that's because like nutrition was the one thing I was doing well. Everything else I was doing terribly with regards to stress management. So that was the one place where I didn't have to change as much. But yeah, so first I would say really taking care to balance your blood sugar. And honestly, if you are someone who knows that you're very chronically stressed and you've got a lot of the symptoms I mentioned, it makes sense to eat a little more often. I feel like that goes against kind of what some people will say, you know, of not eating as often, but really every 3 to 4 hours. And it doesn't have to be forever. You know, it can just be while you're working through the stress and healing your body. But again, if you get those blood sugar dips, it's just going to increase your cortisol and put additional stress on your body. And foods I like in general are just foods that balance your blood sugar and are nutrient dense. So nutrient density is basically just how much vitamin and mineral content a food has relative to its calories. So, like for example, blueberries super nutrient dense. Pasta not nutrient dense at all. It's got quite a bit of calories and it doesn't really have anything beneficial in there, right? At least not like white pasta, refined pasta. So, really just eating those quality foods. So quality protein sources. If you are a meat eater, you know, trying when you can to get the organic sources, the grass-fed sources for beef, wild caught for fish. And there's really important reasons for that. But that's a whole other conversation. Maybe you can have me back on someday and we'll talk about that. But yeah, really looking at those quality protein sources and then getting as many brightly colored fruits and veggies as you can. It's really beneficial for your body, for balancing blood sugar, for your gut health, for all kinds of things. And then looking at adding quality sources of fat too. So things like avocado, nuts and seeds, olive oil, all really good nutrient dense quality sources of fat. And really in terms of balancing blood sugar, you just want to think about combining those things. So, you know, if you only eat an apple, you're probably not going to feel hungry, or sorry, you're not going to feel full, opposite of what I meant to say, for very long. But if you have an apple with some almond butter, that's a snack that could sustain you for 3 hours. So really looking at how you're combining some quality carbohydrates with some protein and fat to keep your blood sugar steady is really, really helpful. And then in avoiding those inflammatory foods that I mentioned. So that would be sugar in general, not necessarily fruit sugar. Fruit has a lot of things in there that are beneficial for you too. When I'm saying sugar, I'm saying like sugar. So like pastries, there's so much sugar even in like coffee drinks. If you're like a, you know, vanilla latte drinker or anything, you're going to get a lot of sugar in those. And gosh, just check your labels because sugar sneaks into all kinds of stuff. Like there's added sugar in pasta sauce all the time, which is crazy to me. So really be mindful of added sugars on labels. And then really reducing what's called omega-6 fats, which are very inflammatory. And again, that's like a whole other conversation, but you really want to be mindful of vegetable oils because that's where most people are getting this source of inflammatory fats from. So things like canola oil, soy oil, cottonseed oil, I'm trying to think of all of them, safflower and sunflower oil. But you'd be amazed when you start turning over packaged foods, even packaged foods from places that are like healthier grocery stores like Whole Foods. So many of them use these oils. And it's because they're really inexpensive for the companies, but they're so inflammatory and hard on your body. So really being mindful of those oils in packaged foods and then making sure you're never cooking with those at home and that you're choosing something like an avocado oil or an olive oil.
Cool. Okay, I was going to ask about avocado oil. So
Yeah.
you answered that. Thank you.
Yeah, that's a great one for sure. It's actually much better to cook with than olive oil because it's more heat stable. So if you heat an oil, sometimes you can actually make it a little inflammatory because the heat damages it. But avocado oil stands up better to heat than olive oil does. So I usually do like olive oil for salad dressings, but then I'll do avocado oil to cook with.
Yeah, I love that because as you may know, I personally have IBS
Yes.
and endometriosis, and um, I noticed through the because basically I had to take my diet and just go with what felt good versus the doctor helping, because at the time, the doctors were looking at the wrong thing. So they didn't have the best advice, but I tried different stuff that I read online. And so with the avocado oil, I noticed that versus the cooked olive oil, like you're saying, I felt better. Like I wasn't feeling a flare up as quickly as I was from olive oil and cooking in that.
Yeah. And actually, I'm really glad you brought that up, because another thing that's really important to mention when we're talking about inflammation in your body causing stress and foods causing that inflammation, another one that's really important is foods that are inflammatory for you. So, like for me personally, I know that gluten and dairy don't work well for my body. Every time I eat them, I experience issues. So it's really identifying, like you said, what foods feel good for you and make you feel good and what foods don't feel good. And most people I think do have at least a couple food sensitivities. So I think it's worth taking the time to figure out what foods aren't really serving you and eliminating, those foods as much as possible.
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing all of this. I feel like it shed a light for me, and I'm sure anyone that's listening. And we'll definitely have to have you come back, of course. I
Yeah,
don't think
I
it'll
would
be the
love
last
to.
time. Yes.
Absolutely. I would love to. We can do a little nutrition episode and I can go more in depth on the food quality stuff. That would be awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm sure by then that you'll have your program running,
Yes.
so we can talk about that and how that's going. So we love that. Yay.
Yay. Thank you so much again for having me on. This has been amazing.
Yes. Thank you for joining me. And I cannot wait until the next time.
I know, me too. Part 2's on the way.
Yes. All right. Thank you.
Thanks, Bree.
Bye.